welcome to a Web of Stories. And my name is Melinda, and today is Tuesday, and I'm kind of, sort of, maybe doing a tag. Let me tell you about it. About a week ago, Angelia at Read and Reread did I think she called it a time warp, where she took out some of her old reading journals. She's been keeping reading journals for a very long time, and looked to see what she was reading in a past year. I think it was like 2008 or something. I'm not sure. I will link the video. I'll actually link it up there. So you can go watch it. I thought that was a fantastic idea. However, the problem is that I use spreadsheets mostly for my journals. Although I am starting a journal now, but I mostly use spreadsheets for my journals, and I only had a couple years. So I didn't think I'd be able to do this. But then I remembered I've been using Goodreads for a very, very, very long time. And so I went into Goodreads and I figured out that the first year that I had a complete year's worth of data was, and it happened to be 2013. 10 years ago. Perfect. So I decided to take a look at that year. So first of all, let me tell you about kind of where my life was at that time. As of now, I'm full-time parent. We were still living in this house, same place. It was pre-pandemic, obviously. I had a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, which is very different than having a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old, although pretty much the same amount of work, interestingly. I was having, and I bring this up because it will be reflected in the books I talk about, I was having a bit of a crisis of faith. We were at a church and I was starting to realize this was not a good fit. I love a lot of the people at that church, but there are just things about that church I do not agree with. We've since moved on. We have a much better for us church now, much happier, but that's going to be reflected in this list. I was also just starting out as a book blogger, and so I had a lot of books that I had been solicited to read and review. A lot of them were like indie published books, so that was interesting. So I will tell you that in that year I read, oh my gosh, I read 87 books. I am not going to go through all those books with you. I'm going to go through my top 5 and my bottom 5 books from that year. And the way I did this was I put everything into a spreadsheet and I recorded what I rated it and what Goodreads rated it. And at the time I was doing straight stars. So 1 star, 2 star, 3 star, 4 star, 5 star. No half stars, anything like that. And it was kind of a gut feeling. I was still pretty new to this. And then I have the Goodreads rating as of the time I recorded this. So then when I sorted it out, I sorted it first by my rating, and then I did the Goodreads rating to break any ties. So that's how I came up with this list. I'm going to start with my top 5 because they aren't as interesting, I think, as my bottom 5. But my 5th highest rated book for that year was Orphan Train by Christina Baker Klein. I think everybody read this book in 2013. It was very popular. I gave it a 5. All my top 5s are all 5 stars, by the way. That's what I gave them in 2013. Whether or not I would still give them a 5 star, I'll let you know. The average rating on that one was a 4.19. I would probably give this like maybe a 4 now. And the next book, number 4, is Bread and Wine by Shauna Niequist. Shauna Niequist is a writer who I love. I've read all of her books and she's written quite a few. She does come from a Christian background, but her writing is not overtly Christian. But she talks a lot about community and happiness and things that she's not far off in age for me. So things that I am going through as well. I gave that book, and that book is all about like hospitality and bringing people together at the table. And it had a lot of recipes, and I did make some recipes out of it. I gave it 5 stars. It has a 4.22 Goodreads rating. I would give it at least a 4.5, an A+. I would give it at least an A+, if not a 5 star now. So the next book is Out of the Spin Cycle by Jen Hatmaker. And Jen Hatmaker is really interesting because she shows up a lot in books that I read in 2013. And if you don't know who Jen Hatmaker is, she is also a Christian writer, but she has gone through her own evolution. So she's a much different writer and person now in 2023 than she was in 2013. And in 2013, she was still writing the Bible studies and all these sorts of things. She's very funny. She's very funny to write. She has a podcast that is very popular. I will admit, I'm personally not a fan of her podcasting style, just her interviewing style. So I don't listen to it that often. But she is very popular and she has written many books. She went viral with a Facebook post she did one May probably about this time, about how parents are just so tired. We're just trying to make it to the end of the school year. And every May it goes viral again. And this was one of her books. I honestly don't remember anything about it at this point, but I think I read like 4 of her books that year when I was going through it. So I just think that's really interesting that she shows up there. I gave it again a 5 and had a 4.24. This is actually a tie for second. I'm looking at this because it has the exact same rating. It just is alphabetically lower. So I'm going to say this is actually one of 2 number 2s. My second number 2. This is really interesting. This is a book called Fear, Faith, and a Fistful of Chocolate by Deborah M. Cody. I did look up my review on this. It is another Christian book. I don't remember anything about this book. So right there, I would not be giving it a 5-star today. And it's probably not something that would even appeal to me. But at the time when I was kind of feeling this spiritual, I needed something. I was reading a lot of these books, even though probably if I went back to a lot of them, not Jen Hatmaker so much, and definitely not Sean Nyquist, but if I went back to a lot of them, I'd really cringe about what was in those books. And I think this was one of them. So I think that's really interesting that one was so high. And then my number 1 book, and this is a book that has a very wide appeal. Interestingly, I did mark on this list of books that I read for book clubs. And this was a book that I had supposed to have read for book club a few, like 4 or 5 years earlier, and I couldn't because I was pregnant and it was giving me really frightening dreams. So I had put it off till I was not pregnant and was able to sleep enough to read it. And that is The Book Thief by Marcus Zuzak. And I gave that 5 stars and has a 4.39 rating on Goodreads. I don't know, this might still be a 5-star book for me. I will say Bread and Wine and The Book Thief are the 2 that are probably still 5 stars. If I were to read them for the first time again, I would probably still give them the same rating. The other ones, I don't remember anything about Fear, Faith, and a Fistful of Chocolate. And I read so much Jen Hatmaker. I don't know why Out of the Spin Cycle stuck out to me that year. Yeah. And Orphan Train, I would still rate highly, just probably not as highly. Okay, let's go to my bottom 5. This is where it gets fun. So, my 5th lowest rated book. These are not all independently published books. However, this one is. It's called His Last Mistress. It's by Andrea Zuvich. I do remember that this was a historical fiction. I believe it was in the Restoration, but I'm not entirely sure about that. I remember it not being well written. I also remember, I'm going to be very kind of vague about this because I could be wrong, but I still vividly remember this. There's a scene in this book that I very clearly remember seeing in both another book and a movie adaptation of that book. And I almost remember the scene being very, very close. And I know that in my review, I wrote about this and the author got really mad at me, but I'm sorry. That's what I remember. Like it's the scene in Gone with the Wind where Scarlett O'Hara comes down the stairs and Clark Gable looks up or Rhett Butler looks up and sees her. That's the scene. Like, I remember that very clearly, reading that going, I have read this before. And I remember it's very similar. And she says, well, I've never even seen the movie. I don't know. All I'm saying is it's uncomfortably similar. So that was His Last Mistress by Andrea Zuvich. The 4th worst book I read, and I shouldn't say worst, the 4th lowest rated book that I read in 2013 was The Fountain of St. James Court by Sina Jester Naslund. I do remember both this and His Last Mistress were both books I was asked to read and review for a publicity tour. So, but this one I just remember being really boring. Like, I just remember there not really being a plot and being really, really bored with this. I do also remember I gave it to my mother to read and I can't remember what she thought of it. I honestly can't tell you anything more about that book. It did not stick with me at all. So the next one, I don't know if people would recognize this book, but it's a sequel and they would definitely recognize the book to which it is a sequel. And this is the 3rd lowest rated book. And that is Revenge Wears Prada by Lauren Weisberger. I need to not read Lauren Weisberger. I did not like the book The Devil Wears Prada at all. I liked the movie, and I like the movie for reasons. The reasons that I like the movie are the ways it's different from the book, which should have told me something. But I also think I picked this up hoping that, probably having the memory of the movie in my mind and not the book, but I did not like this book. I just remember it was like a really forced sequel. That book did not need a sequel, and everything in this book felt really forced. I didn't think it was well written. It was just annoying. I don't read Lauren Weisberger anymore. I don't know if she's written anything else, to tell you the truth, but she got a lot of, moolah from The Devil Wears Prada. She's doing just fine. Okay. Probably the most interesting book on this part of the list is my second worst rated book. And that is because I gave it 1 star, but on Goodreads, its average rating is 4.11 stars. And I believe if you go to the page for this on Goodreads, like the first review you will see is my 1-star review, because I have so many likes and comments on it. I'm not saying, I think it's probably more the comments, because there are definitely people who don't agree with me in my review here. But that is Carry On Warrior by Glennon Doyle. She was Glennon Doyle Melton then. This was her first book. I had 2 big issues with this. One is, this is one of many books that came out sort of around that time where it was a blog to book. And basically it was just like they took a bunch of blog entries and put them together as a book. Blanket statement, that doesn't work. It really doesn't. And it really didn't work on this one because it wasn't especially chronological. So there was no chronological flow in this book. That was a huge problem for me. And that's not talking about the writing. That's just a structure problem with this book, but it was big enough that it really knocked the rating down. I think that, let's say if I rated in a way that I started at a 5 and then knocked down, that would have brought it from a 5 to a 3. Just the structure of the book. And here's the part, and I even say in my review, like, I don't read The Monastery. I am not a follower of Glennon Doyle. And I know a lot of people love her. I understand that. I am not someone who is familiar with her. I'm coming in with nothing, but this woman sounds like a kook to me. There was just sort of this frenetic energy from her. And I was like, I don't know. I don't think this woman is well. And I don't want to go too far, push that thought too far, but I just like, this woman is, this does not sit well with me, what she's saying. And and I understand there are people who really like her. And I think that if you are really familiar with, especially at that time, remember we're talking 10 years ago, she was in a very different place 10 years ago. I don't know what she's like now because I haven't read any of her other books. And no, I am not going to read Untamed. I'm sorry, I'm just not. But Glennon Doyle's just not my person, and that's fine. But I understand that if you are someone who really follows Glennon Doyle and really respects her, you probably would love this book. But my review is my viewpoint, and this just really did not sit well with me. And honestly, if I read it again, I would still probably give it 1 star. Okay, the last book is probably a book no one has ever heard of. And this one was, this one is Godiva. It's also, I only gave 2 1-stars that year, and one was Carry On Warrior and the other was Godiva. And that's by an author named Nicole Gallant. This is historical fiction about Lady Godiva. And as I have said before, I have a degree in history, know about history. So there are things that I really can't stand. Now there are times when writers will kind of switch the history around, make things work to make the story work. And they usually say at the end, we did this to do this, and that's fine. I'm not going to get into that. But when you have just things in stories that are just horribly anachronistic, that is a big issue. So there was a lot of that. There was also like the characters would talk with these and thous, which honestly not even historically accurate for that sometimes. But then they would also like merge into these weird like 21st century things, but still use these and thous. So it was just really weird. I was like, what is going on with this book? I was like, honestly, this is my lowest rated book. It is the lowest rated because of the Goodreads rating. Otherwise, I will say if I had to rate them between Carry On Warrior and Godiva, I don't know. I don't know if I'd switch the places, because Carry On Warrior, even if it had been structured better, and I'm not even blaming Glennon Doyle for the structure, I'm blaming the editor, whoever put this together, for the structure. Even if the structure was an issue, I still wouldn't have liked that book, because it's just, I'm not a Glennon Doyle person. I might have given it a 2-star if it were structured better, but it would not have gotten better than that for me. But Godiva, like, that would have been a really interesting story, but what was this thing that I got? And I feel really bad because Nicole Gallant is still writing, and I haven't read her again, and I don't feel a need to, but I hope that she finds success. And I feel bad that, I don't feel so bad that Glennon Doyle is so low, because she's doing just fine. Glennon Doyle is doing just fine. But Nicole Gallant, I mean, I don't want to, I hope she finds success. This is not the sort of book she should be writing. If she's going to write historical fiction, I've been told she's quite the researcher. I think maybe she needs to hire a different researcher, or get someone to read to kind of at least get some things right there. And I hope that maybe historical fiction isn't her place to write. I don't know. I'm not trying to throw the writer out with the book here, but the book was a mess. So, and the other 3 books, as I said, those were 2 stars. His Last Mistress, The Fountain of St. James Court, Revenge Wears Prada. I don't know if I would change the rating on those, to tell you the truth. I don't know. I mean, like The Fountain of St. James Court, I can't tell you what that book was about. I vaguely remember reading it. I vaguely remember the cover of it, because it had like a French art that was reminiscent of the art pre-French Revolution. It had kind of that cover on it. I remember giving it to my mother, but I don't remember the story. So I don't know. Anyway, those are my books. I have 78 other books on this list. I actually read more books than this, because I took out books that I read to my kids and books that I knew were rereads. So I actually did read more than this. But I think this was a really kind of fun exercise. And I want to thank Angelia for starting this. If you are able to and you are interested, you don't have to do 10 years. You could do 2 years. You don't have to do... You could do all of your books. You can just do whatever you want with it. I think the whole point is just to look back and see where you are. I thought that was really interesting. In fact, what I am going to continue doing is, I have this document that I started with these books. I'm just going to continue filling it out, and maybe next year I'll see what I was doing in 2014. We'll see. Anyway, if you made it this far, thank you so much. Give this video a thumbs up. It really helps me. Give me a subscribe. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.